Yes, but we've got to be clear on both sides is what both sides want. There are big questions. One on Trump's side, which is absolutely clear, they're not his team. Marco Rubio, Waltz, the national security advisor, and General Kellogg, the special envoy in Ukraine, whether they're completely in agreement about what they want. I get the impression, and I'm only working from open sources, that they're not on the same page yet. They haven't got an agreed position. Now let's flip that over. And when we can never really know with the secretiveness of that organization what is going on in the Kremlin. But there have been unofficial noises that there is real concern about how Russia and the Russian economy, and particularly the war economy, now depends on China. And it is fairly evident from some noises that we're getting through Telegram, through unofficial channels, that some fear in the Russian security apparatus that China is there to, as one Telegram source put it, to make Russia into a mineral and resource colony. China, which has enormous resources itself, as we know, is rapacious. In other words, grabbing all it can in terms of REE, rare earth elements. And by the way, the US is on much the same mission, and it will all come down to that. But as I said, the other thing that is so interesting is to see actually the state of the Russian economy. How can you keep up this enormous pressure to turn so much of economic, by that I mean fiscal and industrial effort, to the war, to the war, which is grinding on, but at a tremendous price. How many months that can go on? I think it'll be a few months more, but I think we're beginning to see the cracks already.
And do you expect a ceasefire deal on Ukraine to be reached until the end of this year?
I expect something. And why I'm so cautious with my words is I don't think it will be a resolution. I think they're going to find it, all parties are going to find it very difficult to get to a resolution, a position on which you can build. Because after all, we've got precedent here, which they keep citing, is, Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. And it's amazing to see when you get pronouncements from Lavrov and from Putin's own office, from the more extravagant pronouncements from Medvedev, really they are bringing up the same terms of Minsk, of the Minsk agreement. It's a demilitarization to start with. That they've got stuck on that. What would be very interesting to see is how much Russian forces have the capacity to enforce the kind of deal that they seem to be looking for.
Also, let's cover recent statements from the Russian ally. Do you feel that the public opinion in Russia is also moving forward peaceful settlement of the war in Ukraine? And also Reuters reported that Russian ally would like to see this war settled as soon as possible.
Well, the Russian allies, it's fairly clear through the Astana process, the CSTO, the Central State Treaty Organization, don't like providing cannon fodder, which is what they're there for. That this is Putin's appeal to them. Can you support me? And we've even had this from the recently re-elected, if I can put it like that, head of government, head of state in Belarus. That it is a drag on them, and they would like to see some settlement. I think particularly that with the fragility in the Caucasus, particularly, that they would like some kind of settlement. But Russia, the Putin hard center, really would like to do to Ukraine what it is already doing quite successfully in Georgia, but it's a completely different proposition. That is takeover by erosion. Ideally, in the Putin conspectus, in his cosmos, that really Ukraine would become very much like Belarus under Lukashenko, which is not going terribly well. There's still a very restive population in Belarus, that they would like to become some form of satellite. The bottom line with the Putin negotiation, is that what he really wants is to make it absolutely clear that Ukraine, along with Belarus, along with Moldova, along with the recalcitrant elements in the Caucasus, are part of the greater Russian sphere of influence and command. It's a very retro view. It almost belongs, as so much with Putin belongs to Tsarist Russia, with him as a Tsar, this sort of Russian, as the great writer Ryszard Kapuscinski would have put it, Russian imperium. But that looks more and more out of date as Russia threatens to fall behind so much, particularly in the technology of war. I mean, in a way, tactically, it's been outsmarted in a very curious and very disturbing way, it must be, for Russia, technically by Ukraine, and strategically, of course, by China. China is a senior partner now, and Russia is moving slowly, or not so slowly, from the status of a junior ally to being a client.
Also, North Korean troops have been pulled off of the front line in the Kursk region because of the high casualties rate. They have been redeployed out of the war zones there. What is your assessment of this development?
Well, I don't know, because I'm not there and it's very difficult to calculate reports. But what I would say is that there has been a ferocious in this very sad scenario, but to say there's something almost comical about the propaganda war about the North Koreans. Things have not gone well for them. Let that be said. It's not clear whether 8,000 or 11,000 were committed. And certainly a lot have been killed and injured. I think that the reports from British and American intelligence, working from surveillance and from open sources, that the casualty list is over 3,500, seems to me to be pretty clear. What is so terribly interesting is that very much sort of pro-Russian propaganda channels, and there's one that purports to come from the German Axel Springer publishing empire, that was pointing out that these are the elite troops. They were there to show the way of how the new ways of war would be done in North Korea. They would be there to help train Russians. I mean, where the imagination of the writer comes from is quite extraordinary. But the North Korean gamble by Putin's Kremlin seems to have caused an awful lot of trouble, and it seems, from sources working in Shanghai and Beijing, tell me, it seems to have annoyed the Chinese hierarchy an enormous amount, giving such free play to the maverick regime in Pyongyang of Kim Jong-un.
Let's cover also another idea of sending European peacekeeping forces to Ukraine. President Zelensky says that there is a need for at least 200,000 troops, European troops in Ukraine, to properly enforce a ceasefire line in case if there would be such a deal. What is your take on that?
Well, it sounds that President Zelensky is playing Trump at his own game, isn't he? You know, when you make a deal, you bid up more numbers than you can possibly get, and you just see what happens. But where President Zelensky seems to really have hit the mark, if there is going to be a peace deal, if there's going to be a demarcation, and if it emerges as something like that between North and South Korea, in that frozen conflict, it really will need a lot of monitoring. A lot of it can be done by surveillance. A lot of it can be done with the assistance of AI models and so on. But this is where it is going to be a very difficult test, and where Trump has a very strong argument. This is in the interest of wider European security. You cannot expect it to be managed by the Americans, and it must be managed by European NATO partners who may be working through the EU defense arrangement, which is an embryonic, if you could do an embryonic recreation, it's an embryonic recreation of the old Western European Union. And it isn't very effective, frankly. The EU element, just to park that to one side, is not effective as long as you've got dissidents like Slovakia and above all Hungary saying they don't go along with this at all. But this is where it is a very big moment for NATO as well. And this will come up at the summit in The Hague on the 24th and the 25th of June. Because how much of its own affairs can the European alliance in NATO do? And this is the point. Trump talks numbers. You've got to up the expenditure in proportion to your GDP of anywhere between 3.5, as his advisors put it, to 5% of GDP. The 5% of GDP simply won't happen. But in fact, where he does have an argument, and this is where there's a great deal of difficulty, and it is very important for the prospect for future peace and stability in Ukraine, is what the European partners will do for themselves. And that is where you get great confusion at the top. The big three military powers in European NATO, Germany, France, and Britain, are bedeviled by political confusion. And I include my country. I very much include Britain in that, because the Starmer government simply does not seem to know what it wants with defense and security and resilience policy and strategy. And there's something culturally about them where they do not seem to understand how the utility of force, the projection of power, enforcing a foreign policy requires credible military. And there's so much at the moment which is simply incredible about Britain's military posture.
Also, let's cover Trump's threats to Panama and Greenland. Donald Trump says that the U.S. will take control over Panama Canal and Greenland in diplomatic or even military way. He does not exclude deploying troops to this region. What do you make of this Trump's threats around the globe?
He hasn't got enough. He hasn't got enough troops to do all that he says that he might have to think of doing. Look, he can't do Greenland, and what do you do? I mean, they've got rights to 3 bases, a cluster of 3 bases there. What's he going to do? A major submarine base? He is very keen on a lot of these things. There's minerals and oil which make people very interested, particularly off the northeast of the great island of Greenland. But a lot of it, including Panama, is about area access defense denial, as you know, in the jargon, AADD. And he's got this obsession that China controls the Panama Canal. No, it doesn't. Chinese groups, Hong Kong-based, I believe, have an interest, quite a powerful interest, in 2 of the 5 ports. There are 4 major ports on the Panama Canal. So let's talk back there. He cannot confront Mexico and Canada, and it's not quite clear what he intends with Canada, occupy the canal zone of Panama, claim that America can take over Gaza, which is the latest thing, albeit temporarily, that's come up in the press conference, the news conference with Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington. It's simply not there, because it's very peculiar to say, even with a defense budget of well over $750 billion, something going north of $800 billion dollars. The forces are hollowed out. There are shortages of personnel in key areas. A lot of the procurement programs are completely jammed, particularly submarine building, for example. And right across the advanced Western powers, there is a problem with recruiting. Young men and women are more reluctant to put their lives on the line and go to the military. They are risk averse for all kinds of reasons. This brings us back to your question. Can Trump occupy Greenland or parts of Greenland, as he has threatened with the Danes, occupy Panama and take it back, and claim that he's got to help out Canada, and he's obsessed by this because Canada and the alliance must keep a hold on at least and have a control of one of the major Arctic routes. This is really quite something. But having said that, if you'll just indulge me, the thing that we're learning here is that Trump does behave like a property dealer towards his allies. He's not very good with allies. He doesn't know how to schmooze friends. He seems really happier to schmooze people who are less than democratically underpinned, if I could put it like that, like Putin, even Xi to some extent, and Kim Jong-un. He seems to like dictators rather a lot. But he's got to bring on board a lot of the of his truly democratic allies. And there's an interesting thing to note. I'm fascinated in the whole story of the Arctic regions, which is a big area of contestation. He needs the Nordic powers, particularly the Norwegians, absolutely on side with him, as much as he needs the Danes, the Swedes, and the Finns. But the Norwegians, and I'll come back to why in a minute, and he needs Britain, by the way, very, very much in Antarctica, because that is another area of contestation where there is a quasi-military militarization that's been going on, particularly from Chile, Argentina, including China, that has its fifth major research station. It's got nothing to do with peaceful civil science so much. In its main intent, it's to do with space and space control and satellite control as much as anything terrestrial. And why Norway? Norway, proportionally, certainly, has the richest heritage fund going. Proportionately, it has as much clout as that of Saudi Arabia. And that's why Trump will need them, because what does he share with Britain, France, Italy, and a lot of his other allies is huge debt. And a lot of the debt, incidentally, in junk bonds is owed by China. So going back to the point about Arctic security, Norway can pay its way. Technically, it's extremely capable. It punches well above its weight in real terms and holds the key to the Arctic entrance into Europe for Russia and China. And that will come more and more to be on the agenda. It will go up the agenda steadily through his presidency.
I also have a follow-up question about Gaza. Recently, U.S. President Donald Trump said that he can take control over Gaza and be in charge of reconstruction of this region. He also does not exclude sending military troops to Gaza. Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, says that this is interesting idea. What is your reaction to this statement, and what could this mean for the entire region?
Well, it's wildly unrealistic, and it's very interesting reading the comments from the region. And I think that even the mild opposition in Israel is slightly startled at this, because America has been so reluctant to get in there. It's not had a good history. Remember, going into Lebanon in 1958, and then in 1982 with an MNF, a multinational force. It ends with battleships bombarding the Shuf Mountains. In the end, it does not go well. The commitment would be enormous, and also if you transfer the Gaza population of about 2 million plus, how do you do it? How do you manage it? Particularly as the nominated countries, Egypt, Saudi to some extent, but Jordan, are so reluctant to receive an influx of Palestinians, and an enforced transfer is against international law as well established now. It's against the laws of humanitarian law. So we'll put that there. I think it was just, again, a developer's reaction. He's quite right. Trump in saying that Gaza looks like a demolition site, and how you deal with it and manage it is going to be very, very difficult indeed. By the way, it will not be the Riviera of the Eastern Mediterranean, because conditions, physical conditions, environmental conditions are extremely difficult. And the wiser Israelis have known this for years and years and years. The aquifers, the access to fresh water, the desertification, it is a huge problem, and it would depend on fresh water being brought in from the north, particularly through reverse osmosis and other processes from Israel. It requires a deal between Israel and the Palestinians. This is the bottom line, and that has been left vague. Any conclusion to the Gaza ceasefire ends up with a notion of the Palestinian state, but there being Palestinian statehood, which Netanyahu and his hard-right allies, Ben Gvir currently outside the coalition but threatening to come back in, and Smotrich, absolutely will not take. But what Trump has done with this press conference is that he has given Netanyahu a route to get re-elected. Okay, we can follow the American plan. And on the wilder edges, the wilder shores of this plan, the idea that you could push Palestinians out of Gaza and also suppress them and possibly even expel them from the occupied West Bank, or what the Israeli establishment like to call Judea and Samaria, is absolutely beyond imagination, and probably would provoke a wider Israel-Arab war.
Thank you, Mr. Fox, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you. Yes. Pleasure.